His hand was inside my blouse when I found the documents, not in passion, in precision. Étienne Verenne's fingers moved against my ribcage with clinical intent, pinning ivory silk directly to my skin while his other hand gripped my hip hard enough to bruise. "Breathe in," he commanded, and I obeyed like I'd been obeying for 3 months now, ever since the morning he walked into that Paris atelier and pointed at me like I was livestock he'd decided to purchase. The fabric crushed between us cost more than my mother's house in Lagos. His breath was warm against my collarbone as he knelt to adjust the hem, and when he looked up at me from that position, gray eyes cold and assessing beneath those aristocratic cheekbones, I felt the same sick thrill I'd felt the first time he touched me. Terror and want, twisted so tight I couldn't tell them apart anymore. "Perfect," he murmured, his thumb brushing the underside of my breast as he secured the final pin. "You're learning how to be still when someone powerful touches you." That's when I saw them. The documents scattered across his mahogany desk, half hidden beneath fabric samples. Transaction records, offshore accounts, Maison Verenne's beautiful haute couture empire, built on laundered money and aristocratic corruption stretching back decades. And I was standing in his private atelier at midnight, wearing a gown I couldn't afford, marked by his hands in ways I'd stopped pretending were professional, complicit, owned, utterly trapped. He stood, circling me one final time, and smiled that controlled, devastating smile that had seduced me into this golden cage. "Now take it off," he said softly, slowly. "I want to see how the silk falls away from your body." And God help me, I reached for the zipper. Zara Okan had spent 26 years learning to make herself smaller, quieter, less threatening to people who confused confidence with arrogance when it came wrapped in dark skin and a Lagos accent. So when she walked into Maison Verenne's legendary atelier on an October morning, she had already prepared herself to shrink, to smile gratefully, to accept whatever scraps of legitimacy this Parisian fashion house might offer the only African among 12 international interns competing for a single permanent position. The atelier occupied a converted 18th century hotel particulier in the 8th arrondissement, all soaring ceilings and northern light, smelling of fabric starch and inherited wealth. Vintage dress forms lined the walls like elegant ghosts. The other interns, sleek Europeans with art school pedigrees and parents who summered in Provence, chatted easily while the head seamstress droned through orientation protocols. Zara stood at the end of the line, memorizing everything. The way light hit the cutting tables, the organizational system for thread, the subtle hierarchy in how people moved through space, deferring to invisible rules she hadn't learned yet. Then he entered. No announcement, no introduction. Étienne Verenne simply appeared in the doorway like he'd materialized from old money itself, and the room's entire energy shifted, rearranged itself around him. He was tall, 6'2", maybe 6'3", moving through the atelier with the fluid economy of someone who'd never had to justify his presence anywhere. The three-piece suit was charcoal Savile Row, perfectly tailored to a lean frame that suggested disciplined athleticism rather than gym vanity. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on Roman coins, aristocratic nose, sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled and never apologized. But it was the eyes that froze Zara in place, pale gray, almost colorless, assessing everything with the clinical detachment of someone evaluating assets. He walked the line of interns without speaking, studying each one for perhaps 3 seconds before moving on. Dismissive, bored, looking for something none of them possessed. When he reached Zara, he stopped. Those gray eyes traveled from her face down to her hands, then back up with such deliberate slowness that she felt stripped despite wearing her best interview suit. Not sexual, worse, appraising, like he was calculating her worth down to the decimal point. "You." His voice was low, accent razor-thin and expensive. "What's your name?" "Zara Okan, Monsieur Verenne." She was the only one who'd recognized him. She'd researched obsessively, memorizing the family history, knowing that preparation was the only advantage poverty had given her. He circled her once. Zara forced herself still, feeling his attention like physical touch. He noted the cut of her modest blazer, the slight tremor in her fingers she couldn't quite control, the way she held her spine straight despite wanting to fold into invisibility. "You'll do," 2 words. That's all it took to change everything. He turned to his assistant, a severe woman in her 50s who'd appeared behind him like a shadow. "Clear my calendar tomorrow afternoon. I'm taking this one to the Dior archives." The room went silent. Several interns stared openly. The head seamstress looked confused. Whatever Étienne Verenne had just announced, it had never happened before. He didn't explain, didn't look back. Just walked out, leaving Zara standing there with 11 pairs of eyes burning into her and absolutely no idea what she'd just been selected for. "Well," the head seamstress said carefully, "I suppose you should arrive at 9 tomorrow, Miss Ocon, and wear something presentable." Étienne didn't explain why he'd chosen her. The next day, he picked her up himself, driving a vintage Jaguar through Paris traffic with one hand, shifting gears like he was bored of speed limits. Zara sat in the passenger seat, hyper-aware of the leather interior that probably cost more than her university tuition, trying not to stare at his hands on the wheel. Strong hands, precise, the kind that had never done manual labor but somehow looked capable of anything. "You researched me," he said abruptly, not looking over. "Statement, not question." "Yes, Monsieur Verenne." "Why?" "Because walking into rooms unprepared is how people like me fail. People like you can afford ignorance. I can't." The corner of his mouth lifted fractionally, not quite a smile. "People like you, meaning what?" "Meaning I'm here on a 3-month visa extension and a scholarship that expired 2 weeks ago. Meaning my mother sold jewelry to pay for my flight. Meaning I don't have wealthy parents to catch me if this doesn't work." "So you're desperate." The bluntness should have offended her. Instead, Zara felt strange relief at his honesty. "Yes." "Good. Desperation is useful. It means you'll pay attention." They drove in silence after that, through increasingly exclusive arrondissements until they reached the Dior flagship. Étienne parked illegally, tossed keys to a doorman who materialized instantly, and led Zara through a private entrance she'd never have found alone. The archive was hidden behind layers of security, temperature-controlled, reverent. Decades of haute couture under glass, each piece a small museum unto itself. Étienne walked her through the collection in near silence, occasionally pulling something out with gloved hands. A 1952 bar jacket with impossible tailoring. An evening gown from 1957 that seemed to defy gravity. Each time he'd explain in that low, precise voice, "This neckline. Study it." Monsieur Dior understood that fabric should whisper against skin, not scream. Zara absorbed everything, terrified to speak, more terrified to miss something important. When she reached instinctively for a dress, soft pink silk that looked like it would feel like water, his hand caught her wrist. Not roughly, but with absolute authority. "You don't touch," Étienne said quietly, his thumb pressing against her pulse point. "Not yet. You haven't earned it." Zara's breath caught. His grip was professional, impersonal. So why did it feel like the most intimate thing anyone had ever done to her? He held her there for 1 second longer than necessary, then released her. "Turn around." She obeyed without thinking. He removed his suit jacket, Brioni she recognized now, having spent the previous night studying designer labels, and draped it over her shoulders. The weight was immediate, substantial. It smelled like bergamot and something darker she couldn't identify. Étienne adjusted the lapels with clinical precision, his knuckles brushing her collarbone. "The weight of good tailoring," he explained, his breath warm against her ear, "should feel like an embrace, like someone powerful has decided you're worth protecting." Zara stood frozen, drowning in expensive wool and the realization that this wasn't about fashion. This was about ownership. "Do you understand?" he asked. I think so, Monsieur Verenne." "Étienne." He stepped back, studying his handiwork. "When we're alone, you call me Étienne. The formality is for other people. Why did you choose me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Those pale eyes met hers. "Because when I looked at you, you were terrified, but refused to apologize for taking up space. That's rare. Most people either apologize constantly or pretend they belong. You did neither." "I don't belong here." "Not yet, but you will, if you're brave enough." The package arrived at Zara's hotel at 7 p.m. She was staying in a budget place near Gare du Nord, the kind where the bathroom was down the hall and the heating barely worked. After a full day back at the atelier, where the other interns had treated her with barely concealed resentment, she'd been looking forward to cheap takeaway and researching French fashion history until her eyes burned. Instead, she found a box on her bed, black, matte, tied with ivory ribbon. Inside, a dress, deep emerald silk that seemed to absorb light. No note, no explanation. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Do you know your measurements in French sizing? Étienne's voice smooth and certain. No, how did you? 38. You're a 38. The dress will fit. There's a car downstairs. I'm taking you to dinner. I didn't agree. You will. A pause. Do you know what the other interns are doing tonight, Zara? They're networking at a gallery opening in the Marais, trying to make connections, performing ambition for people who might remember their names. You're already past that. You've been selected. Now you decide if you're brave enough to see where that leads. He hung up before she could respond. Zara stared at the dress, at her reflection in the small, cracked mirror, at the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. The dress fit like it had been made for her body specifically. Because it had been, she realized. He'd measured her with his eyes in that archive, calculated her dimensions like an equation he'd already solved. The car was waiting. Black sedan, driver in a suit, everything screaming money so old it didn't need to announce itself. Étienne was in the back seat. He looked up from his phone when she entered, and something flickered across his face. Not quite approval. Something more possessive. Perfect, he murmured. He leaned forward, and before Zara could react, he was fastening her seatbelt himself. His fingers brushed her hip, her shoulder. The gesture was protective and controlling in equal measure. You look like you belong to me already, he said quietly. Zara's heart hammered. She should leave, walk out, go back to her terrible hotel and her safe, predictable life. Instead, she heard herself say, "Where are we going?" Étienne smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It was beautiful and terrifying. Somewhere you'll never forget. Le Grand Vefour occupied a corner of the Palais Royal, all gilt molding and painted ceilings, the kind of restaurant where politicians and fashion royalty came to be seen, where there was no menu because people like Étienne Verenne didn't need options. The world rearranged itself around their preferences. Zara had never felt more out of place in her life. She sat across from Étienne at a table that probably required reservations 6 months in advance, surrounded by 7 pieces of silverware she didn't know how to use, while waiters moved around them like dancers in some choreographed ballet she hadn't been taught. "You're holding the fish knife wrong," Étienne said calmly, not looking up from his perfectly arranged plate. Zara flushed, trying to adjust her grip. His hand covered hers, warm, confident, correcting her hold with the patience of someone who'd trained dogs. Like this, from above, not below, precision, not force. The touch lasted 3 seconds too long to be innocent. When he released her, Zara's hand felt cold. The food arrived in waves, amuse-bouche she couldn't pronounce, fish that had never seen a price tag, vegetables treated like precious jewels. Étienne ordered everything in rapid French, never consulting her. "In my world," he explained, cutting into his duck with surgical precision, "manners aren't about politeness. They're about demonstrating that you belong, that you've been trained. People spend 30 seconds watching how you hold a fork and decide your entire worth based on muscle memory. That's insane. That's power." He took a sip of wine, something red and probably older than Zara's parents. "You can be brilliant, talented, revolutionary, but if you reach for the wrong glass at dinner, certain doors will close forever." "I can order for myself," Zara said, some dormant, rebellious streak finally surfacing. Étienne's smile was cold and amused. "Of course you can, but you won't, not when you're with me." "Why not?" "Because part of learning to navigate my world is understanding when to assert yourself and when to let someone more powerful guide you. I'm teaching you the difference." It should have infuriated her. Instead, Zara felt something darker unfurl in her chest, curiosity about what else he might teach her, about what it would feel like to stop fighting just once and let someone else decide. Between courses, he asked questions about Lagos, her family, her ambitions, but the questions felt strategic, like reconnaissance. He was mapping her, identifying weak points and pressure points with the same precision he'd used to correct her fish knife grip. She asked him almost nothing because she sensed he wouldn't answer, that his privacy was absolute, his history something he offered only in carefully curated pieces. What she learned came from observation. He never spoke loudly, never asked twice for anything. Waiters anticipated his needs before he expressed them. He wore power like his three-piece suit, so naturally he probably forgot he was wearing it at all. By the end of dinner, Zara had learned 17 different things about French dining etiquette and nothing at all about Étienne Verenne beyond what he chose to reveal. Which was, she was beginning to understand, exactly the point. "Thank you for dinner," she said as they left, because her mother had raised her with manners even if they weren't French ones. Étienne helped her into his car, that same protective gesture that felt like ownership, and studied her in the dim interior light. "You're wondering why I'm doing this," he said. "Yes. Wondering if it's professional or personal. If I'm grooming you for the apprenticeship or for something else entirely." Zara's throat went tight. "Yes." "Good. Keep wondering. Ambiguity is useful. It keeps you paying attention." He drove her back to her terrible hotel, walked her to the door like a gentleman from another century, and then did something that made Zara's entire body freeze. He tilted her chin up with 2 fingers and studied her face like she was a painting he was considering purchasing. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "wear your hair down. I want to see it." Then he left, and Zara stood in the grimy hallway of her budget hotel, wearing a dress worth 10,000 euros, feeling like she'd just signed a contract she hadn't been allowed to read. The session started 3 days later. "I need a fit model for the new collection," Étienne announced to the atelier during morning briefing. "Zara, you'll work with me directly, after hours." The other interns stared. The head seamstress looked uncomfortable, but said nothing, because Étienne Verenne could do whatever he wanted, and everyone in that room knew it. That evening, after the other interns left, Zara found herself alone in the private atelier with Étienne, and occasionally a silent seamstress who appeared and disappeared like a ghost. "On the platform," he directed, gesturing to the raised fitting area surrounded by mirrors. Zara climbed up, hyper-aware of her own heartbeat. Étienne approached with an armful of ivory silk, the same fabric he'd pinned on her in the archive. "Arms up," she obeyed. He draped the fabric over her body, began pinning it directly to her clothes, with movements that were professional, efficient, completely appropriate, except for the way his fingers lingered fractionally too long against her ribs, the way his breath warmed her shoulder when he leaned close to check a seam. "Breathe in," he commanded, his hand spanning her ribcage to feel how the fabric responded. Zara inhaled, feeling the silk tighten, feeling his palm firm against her body. "Good. Now exhale slowly." She did. His hand remained. "You're learning," Étienne said quietly, still holding her. "How to stand still when someone powerful touches you. How to let yourself be shaped." Zara met his eyes in the mirror. "Is that what you're doing? Shaping me? Would you object if I was?" "I don't know yet." Another good answer. He stepped back, studied her from multiple angles. His gaze was clinical, but hungry. "Turn slowly. Let me see how the drape falls." She turned. Uwais circled her like a predator, occasionally adjusting a pin, his knuckles brushing her hip, her shoulder, her spine. The intimacy was suffocating. He touched her more in those sessions than anyone had in months, but always with professional justification. Always with that thin veneer of propriety that made it impossible to object without seeming paranoid. "What are you making?" she asked once, desperate to break the weighted silence. "A collection called Conquest." His hands settled on her waist, turning her to face him. They were standing close enough that she could see the ring of darker gray around his irises. "You're my inspiration for it." "Why Conquest?" "Because that's what you are. Territory I'm claiming. A prize I've decided to win." He said it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing fabric weight or thread count, like her personhood was just another variable in his design equation. Zara should have been furious, should have walked out. Instead, she whispered, "And if I don't want to be conquered?" Étienne's thumb traced her jawline, the first touch that was undeniably intimate, undeniably deliberate. Then you'd have left already. He was right. God, he was right, and Zara hated him for it. 3 weeks after the first fitting session, Étienne drove Zara to Normandy. Private runway show, he explained during the 2-hour drive. Major buyers, I need you there. As what? I'm an intern. Not anymore. He handed her a folder without taking his eyes off the road. As of this morning, you're my personal assistant and design consultant. Triple your previous salary, work visa extended indefinitely. The paperwork is already filed. Zara stared at the documents, her name on Maison Verenne letterhead, a salary that made her dizzy, all official and binding. You can't just... I can. I did. His hands tightened fractionally on the steering wheel. Tomorrow you'll sit in the front row beside me. Everyone will see you there and understand what it means. What does it mean? That you're under my protection now, and everyone in that room will know it. The Verenne estate was everything Zara expected and more. Centuries-old chateau, manicured gardens, inherited wealth so old it had fossilized into architecture. Her suite in the guest wing had better furniture than any home she'd ever lived in. That evening, Étienne appeared at her door with a garment bag. You'll wear this tomorrow. Inside was a gown that took her breath away, ivory silk with architectural shoulders, something between wedding dress and armor. It fit perfectly because of course it did. He'd been measuring her for weeks. Monsieur Verenne, I'm not Étienne, he corrected, stepping into her room uninvited. And yes, you are. Whatever objection you're forming, the answer is yes. He hung the garment bag himself, then turned to face her fully. For the first time since they'd met, something cracked in his controlled exterior, something that looked almost vulnerable, beneath the aristocratic perfection. I need you to understand something, he said quietly. In my world, nothing is given freely. Every gesture is transactional. Every relationship is calculated. I'm offering you protection, advancement, access to a life you'd never touch otherwise. In return, I belong to you. Yes. No hesitation, no apology. Zara's hands trembled. And if I refuse, then you can leave right now. I'll have my driver take you back to Paris. You'll return to the intern program, finish your 3 months, and go home to Lagos with a decent reference letter. No threats, no consequences. He meant it. She could hear it in his voice. But if you stay, he continued, stepping closer, you accept what this is. Not romance, not mentorship, ownership, careful, deliberate ownership by someone who's decided you're worth protecting from a world that will otherwise devour you. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said, monstrous and seductive in equal measure. Zara looked at the gown, at Étienne's perfect, controlled face, at the future splitting in front of her, poverty and obscurity, or this golden cage with a man who treated her like territory he'd claimed. I'll wear the dress, she whispered. Something that might have been relief flickered across his features. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with unexpected gentleness. Good girl, he murmured. And Zara hated how those words made her feel, safe and trapped and desperately, shamefully wanted. The runway show was a triumph. The gown Zara wore drew gasps. Étienne's hand on her shoulder throughout the event announced her status more clearly than words. She was his now, and everyone understood. The formal dinner afterward was torture. Too many courses, too many eyes, too many whispered questions about who she was and why the notoriously cold Étienne Verenne kept touching her possessively. Zara escaped to the garden at midnight, desperate for air that didn't taste like champagne and curiosity. She found a stone bench among the manicured topiaries and let herself shake. Running away already? She startled. Étienne materialized from the shadows, smoking a cigarette, the first imperfect thing she'd ever seen him do. I needed air. You needed distance from the performance. He sat beside her, offered her the cigarette. She took it, surprised. It's exhausting, isn't it? Pretending to belong in rooms designed to exclude you. Is that what you do? Pretend? No, I was born into those rooms, but I recognize the performance when I see it. He studied her with those pale eyes. You're wondering if you made the right choice. Staying, accepting my terms. I don't know what I accepted. Ownership, Protection, a very specific kind of transaction where I get someone brilliant to claim, and you get access to a world that would otherwise destroy you. His voice was matter of fact, clinical. It's not love, Zara. I'm not capable of that. Why not? He was silent for a long moment, smoke curling between them. I was 8 years old, he finally said, when my father sat me down and explained that people are assets or liabilities. That love is a weakness exploited by those who want to take what's yours. That the only safe way to care for anything is to own it completely so no one can take it away. Zara's chest tightened. That's horrible. That's my world. He looked at her, and for once the control slipped. He looked tired, almost lost. I saw you in that atelier and thought, there's someone who believes beauty and talent might actually matter. Someone who doesn't know yet that this industry will devour her unless someone claims her first. So you decided to devour me yourself? Yes. The honesty was brutal. But carefully, thoroughly, so that you survive it. Zara turned to him fully, studying this man who'd reshaped her entire life in 3 weeks. You're a monster. I know. He reached for her hand, pressed it against his chest where his heart beat faster than his composed face suggested. But I'm a monster who will make you successful, who will shield you from the cruelty of people who see skin color before talent, who will teach you how to navigate power so you're never powerless again. At the cost of my freedom. At the cost of pretending you were ever free to begin with. Women like you, talented, ambitious, beautiful women from places the fashion world pretends don't exist, you're never free here. You're either exploited by people who feel entitled to your body or dismissed by people who can't see past your accent. I'm offering a third option, owned by someone who recognizes your value. It was the most honest negotiation anyone had ever offered her. Monstrous, seductive, true. Stay, Étienne said quietly. Not a command, a request, maybe even a plea. Let me protect you. Let me make you powerful. And maybe if you're patient enough, you'll teach me that caring for something doesn't require devouring it completely. Zara's heart hammered. She should leave. Walk away. Return to poverty and obscurity and freedom. Instead, she let her hand remain against his chest, feeling that too-fast heartbeat, and whispered, I'll stay. But if you destroy me, Étienne, I promise you'll regret it. His smile was sad and knowing. If I destroy you, Zara, I'll have destroyed the only thing I've ever wanted that I knew I couldn't have. What's that? Someone who chose me, not my name, not my money, just me. He was wrong, of course. She wasn't choosing him. She was choosing survival in a form that looked like belonging. But in that moment, under the French stars with his heartbeat against her palm, Zara let herself believe the lie. It happened on a Tuesday, 3 months after Zara had officially become Étienne's design consultant and personal assistant, a title that fooled absolutely no one. She'd been working late in his private office at the Normandy estate, cataloging vintage pieces for an upcoming retrospective collection. The work was meditative, allowing her to lose herself in fabric and history and forget about the complicated knot her life had become. When she reached for a reference book on the upper shelf, her elbow knocked against a locked drawer in Étienne's mahogany desk. The drawer fell, hit the Persian rug with a muffled thud, sprang open. Inside, financial documents, spreadsheets with figures that made no sense, communications with offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, Singapore. Zara's French was still imperfect, but numbers needed no translation. She sat on the floor, papers spread around her like accusatory ghosts, and understood. Maison Verenne had been laundering money for years, inflated fabric contracts with suppliers who didn't exist, ghost employees collecting salaries, private auction sales of vintage pieces that never actually happened, just paper transactions moving millions of euros across borders. The scheme appeared to have started with Étienne's father, but Étienne hadn't stopped it. He'd perfected it, expanded it, turned the fashion house into a discreet washing machine for oligarchs, corrupt politicians, dictators' families. The documentation was meticulous, arrogant, the work of someone who'd never expected to be questioned. Zara's hands shook as she photographed key pages with her phone. She didn't know why, just knew she needed evidence, proof that the golden cage was built on foundations even more rotten than she'd imagined. She carefully returned everything, locked the drawer, placed it back. When she turned around, a man was standing in the doorway. Not Étienne, his younger brother. Christophe Verenne had his brother's aristocratic features, but warmer coloring, chestnut hair, hazel eyes, a smile that actually reached those eyes. He dressed more casually than Étienne, more modern, like he was trying to distance himself from centuries of inherited stuffiness. "So you found it," Christophe said. His smile didn't waver. "Took you long enough." "Don't look so terrified," Christophe said, stepping into the office. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to save you." Zara stood frozen. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. You just photographed evidence of systematic money laundering. Very thorough photographs, by the way. You got the important pages." He moved to the desk, straightened the disorder she'd tried to hide. "My brother chose well. You're clever. I should call Étienne. Yes, you should. Tell him his latest acquisition has discovered his secret. See how that conversation goes." Christophe perched on the desk edge, casual and unthreatening. "Or you could listen to what I have to say first." Zara's heart hammered. "Why are you here?" "Because I've been watching you, watching how my brother is with you, more possessive than usual, more invested. And I thought, this woman might actually have leverage over him. This woman might be the key to ending a corrupt legacy that's poisoned my family for generations." He pulled out his own phone, showed her documents similar to what she'd just photographed. "I've been building a case against Étienne for 8 months, gathering evidence, finding witnesses, but you're perfect. The naive African intern he seduced and manipulated, the sympathetic victim who can testify to how he operates. The press will eat it alive." "I'm not naive." "Of course you're not, but that's the story that will protect you." He leaned forward. "I'll give you 500,000 euros to testify against my brother, plus guaranteed immunity from prosecution. You'll walk away clean, wealthy, free to start over anywhere you want." The offer was staggering, life-changing, freedom purchased with betrayal. "Why?" Zara managed. "Why would you destroy your own brother?" "Because someone has to stop him before he destroys everything, before he drags our family name so deep into corruption that we can never recover." Christophe's expression hardened. "And because he doesn't love you, Zara, he's incapable of it. You're a project to him, a pretty thing he's training like a pet. I'm offering you an escape before you're completely broken. And what am I to you? A weapon? At least I'm honest about using you. My brother will destroy you and convince you it's devotion." He held out a burner phone. "Think about it. When you're ready to save yourself, call me. But decide quickly. The authorities are already circling, and when this collapses, you don't want to be standing too close to Étienne." He left her there, surrounded by antique furniture and impossible choices. Zara waited until midnight to confront Étienne. She didn't call him. He simply appeared at her hotel room door, the way he always did. Present without being summoned, like he had sensors tracking her distress. "You're upset," he said, studying her face. "What happened?" "I found something, in your office." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Documents, transactions that don't make sense, money moving through Maison Verenne that has nothing to do with fashion." His expression didn't change, but his eyes went dead cold. "What did you find exactly?" she explained, watching him carefully, hoping for denial, praying for an explanation that would make this okay. "Is it true?" she finished. "Is Maison Verenne laundering money?" For a long moment, Étienne said nothing. Then, "Yes." The confirmation hurt more than any lie would have. "My family," he continued, voice perfectly controlled, "has maintained power for 200 years, not through fashion, but through discretion. We facilitate transactions for people whose wealth must remain invisible. The house is legitimate. The money flow is practical. That's illegal. That's criminal. That's survival." He stepped closer, and Zara realized she'd backed against the wall. "Do you think fashion houses run on dress sales alone? This industry is built on dirty money cleaned through beauty. Maison Verenne is simply efficient about it." "I can't be part of this." He was suddenly in front of her, not touching but close enough that she felt trapped. "You already are." His voice was soft, almost gentle. You've been depositing your salary for 3 months. You've accepted gifts worth hundreds of thousands of euros. You've signed NDAs, attended private events, been photographed at my side. If this comes out, Zara, you're not a witness. You're an accomplice. Her stomach dropped. He was right. He'd been coating her in complicity from the beginning, so gradually she hadn't noticed the weight accumulating. That's why you chose me, she whispered. Not because I was talented. Because I was desperate enough to accept anything, vulnerable enough that no one would believe me if I objected. Something flickered across his face. That's part of it. And the rest? The rest is that I saw someone brilliant being slowly crushed by a system designed to exclude her, and I thought, I can protect her, even if my protection looks like possession. That's not protection. That's entrapment. Yes, he didn't deny it, didn't apologize. But you're alive, you're successful, you're building a career in an industry that would have chewed you up otherwise. Would you prefer to be pure and powerless in Lagos or compromised and powerful in Paris? The question was brutal, honest, impossible to answer. Zara decided to leave. She spent the next morning packing her modest belongings, the things she'd arrived with, not the expensive gifts Étienne had given her. She booked a flight to Lagos with money she'd carefully saved, separate from the salary deposits he'd mentioned. She texted Christophe from the burner phone. I want immunity. Full documentation. I'll testify. His response came within minutes. Smart choice. Meet me tomorrow, 2 p.m., Café de Flore. Come alone. Zara felt relief and guilt in equal measure. She was doing the right thing, exposing corruption, choosing freedom over complicity. So why did it feel like betrayal? An hour later, Étienne appeared at her hotel door. He didn't knock, just used a key he'd somehow acquired, because of course he had. Of course he could access any space she occupied. Going somewhere? He was terrifyingly calm. I can't do this anymore. I don't care about fashion or Paris or any of it. You're lying. He closed the door behind him, locked it with deliberate precision. You care desperately. You've worked your entire life to get here. You're not leaving because of conscience. You're leaving because you're afraid. Of course I'm afraid. You're a criminal who's been manipulating me. I'm a man, he interrupted, voice sharp now, who saw potential in you and gave you access to a world you'd never touch otherwise. I've paid you fairly, protected you from an industry that would chew you up, taught you everything I know. What exactly have I taken from you, Zara? My choice! The word broke out of her. You never gave me a choice in any of this. The silence that followed was deafening. Étienne's jaw tightened. You want a choice? Fine. Here it is. You can walk out that door. I won't stop you. No threats, no consequences. Return to Lagos. Tell yourself this was all a terrible mistake. He paused and something anguished finally cracked through his control. Or you stay. Not because you're trapped, but because despite everything, despite knowing exactly what I am, you want to. Zara's hand was on the doorknob. She could turn it. She should turn it. If I stay, she whispered, what happens? I stop lying to you. You stop lying to yourself. And we see how deep this corruption goes. The word choice was deliberate. Corruption as both crime and seduction, the spoiling of something pure. Zara didn't open the door. Étienne exhaled slowly, approached her, turned her to face him. I need you to understand something, he said, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. I'm not a good man. I will hurt you, probably in ways I don't even intend, but I will never pretend to be something I'm not. That's the only honesty I can offer. He kissed her then, not controlling or demanding, but desperate, like he was trying to consume proof that she'd chosen this. When they broke apart, Zara was crying. I hate you for making me want this, she said. I know, he answered. I hate myself for it too. 3 weeks later, French financial police arrived at Maison Verenne with warrants. Zara was in the atelier when it happened, dozens of officers, seizing computers, files, interrogating staff. The careful world Étienne had built was being systematically dismantled around her. Christophe appeared in the chaos, finding Zara among panicking employees. Did you think he'd actually change for you? He was almost pitying. My brother doesn't change. He just finds new ways to keep his possessions close. Before Zara could respond, Étienne arrived, expensive lawyer in tow, absolutely glacial in his composure despite the officers ransacking his life's work. He saw Christophe near Zara, and something dangerous flashed across his face. Get away from her, now. The brothers faced off in the middle of the atelier, years of aristocratic restraint finally shattering. You did this, Étienne said, voice lethally quiet. You've been building this case for months, using Father's stroke as cover. Someone had to stop you before you destroyed everything Father built. Father built this! The laundering, the offshore accounts, the client list, it was all him. I just inherited the consequences. The confession stunned the room. Even the police paused their systematic destruction to listen. Christophe's expression hardened. Then you should have burned it down instead of perfecting it. Now we all pay. They were separated by officers, led to different areas for questioning, but Étienne's eyes found Zara's across the chaos, and she saw something new there, genuine fear that he was about to lose everything, including her. Zara was interrogated for 6 hours. They asked about her relationship with Étienne, her knowledge of illegal activities, her role in the company. They showed her photographs, her wearing designer gifts, attending private events, depositing large salary payments. You're either complicit or a victim, Mademoiselle Ocon, the lead investigator said, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a voice that suggested she'd seen this story before. Which narrative would you prefer? During a break, the woman leaned forward. Men like Étienne Verenne, they don't love, they acquire. Everything you think is special between you, he's probably done with a dozen women before. Save yourself while you can. She slid a prepared statement across the table. Testimony painting Étienne as predatory manipulator, Zara as naive victim coerced into compliance. Sign this and you're on a flight home tomorrow. No charges, no scandal, just a bad experience in Paris. Zara stared at the document, pen in hand. Everything in it was technically true, and yet it was also completely false, reducing their entire complicated relationship to a simple predator-prey narrative that erased her agency, her choices, her complicity. Can I think about it? You have 2 hours. After that, we assume you're refusing to cooperate. Through bureaucratic chance or expensive legal manipulation, Zara was held overnight in the same building where Étienne was being detained. At 2 a.m., he was allowed a brief visit to speak with his lawyer and found Zara in an adjacent holding area. A guard gave them 5 minutes. They faced each other through reinforced glass, cheap phones to speak through. Étienne looked exhausted, his perfect control finally fraying at the edges. Did you give them what they wanted? No accusation in his voice, just exhaustion. Not yet. Why not? Because it would be a lie, not about the facts, about what it meant. Zara, he leaned forward, his composure breaking, I need you to listen to me. What they're offering you, take it, testify against me, save yourself. You want me to betray you? I want you to survive me. His voice cracked. I told you from the beginning I'd hurt you. I just didn't know it would be like this, costing you everything you've worked for, painting you as either criminal or victim when you're neither. She saw it then, genuine love, expressing itself in the only way Étienne knew how, through sacrifice disguised as rejection. What if I don't want to be saved from you? Then you're a fool, but you'd be my fool, and that's the only thing I've ever wanted that I knew I couldn't have. The guard tapped his watch, time almost up. Étienne, Zara said urgently, palm pressed against the glass. What if we both told the truth? Not their version, not ours, just what actually happened. The truth is that I'm guilty of everything they're accusing me of. And I'm guilty of choosing you anyway. Something shifted in his expression. They'll destroy you. Then we burn together, but honestly this time, no more lies, no more games. The guard opened the door. Time was up. Étienne pressed his palm against the glass matching hers. If we do this, tell the truth. There's no going back, no safe narratives, just consequence. I know. You're sure? No, but I'm choosing it anyway. For the first time since she'd met him, Étienne smiled with something that looked like hope. Then let's see what honesty looks like. The proceedings were closed to press but open to families. Christophe testified first, methodical, devastating, laying out decades of fraud with the precision of someone who'd spent months preparing. When he finished, the prosecutors looked satisfied. They had their case. Then Étienne took the stand and did the unthinkable. "My brother is correct," he said calmly. "Maison Verenne has been laundering money since 1987, initiated by our father, continued by me after his stroke. I have client lists, transaction records, offshore account details, everything you need to prosecute not just me, but our entire network of clients." The courtroom erupted. His lawyer tried to stop him. Cécile Verenne looked ready to have a stroke. Even Christophe appeared shocked. "Why are you doing this?" the prosecutor demanded. Étienne's eyes found Zara in the gallery. "Because someone I respect told me that inheriting corruption doesn't absolve you of choosing to perpetuate it. I made that choice. Now I'm unmaking it." When Zara was called to testify, she did exactly what she'd promised, told the truth. "Étienne Verenne manipulated me, controlled me, compromised me ethically. He's also the only person in this industry who treated my talent as legitimate. Both things are true. I stayed knowing the risks. That doesn't make him less guilty. It makes me less innocent." The courtroom was silent when she finished. After testimony, in the courthouse hallway, Étienne was led away in handcuffs. He didn't look back at Zara, some last protective gesture trying to separate her from his consequences. His lawyer approached her. "He's refused bail. Says he deserves to experience what he's subjected others to. He wants you to know he releases you from whatever obligation you feel." Zara understood. Étienne was trying to save her one last time by pushing her away. She also understood. She didn't want to be saved. Not anymore. La Santé prison was not designed for men like Étienne Verenne. Zara visited him weekly, despite his initial refusals to see her. It took 3 months before he stopped trying to push her away, another 2 before he stopped apologizing for destroying her life. The man across from her now looked different, leaner, exhausted, without the armor of expensive suits. His hair was longer, carelessly pushed back. He wore prison-issue clothing with the same natural grace he'd once worn Brioni, but the hauteur was gone, replaced by something more human, more raw. "You look terrible," Zara said, sitting down. "Prison doesn't offer tailoring services." A ghost of his old humor. "Why do you keep coming?" "Because you're not done yet. Neither am I." She slid papers across the scratch table. Business plans, design portfolios, legal documents. "I've been working with Christophe. Maison Verenne is being restructured under new ownership, a cooperative model, workers as stakeholders. Your mother fought it until the courts forced her to sell her shares." Étienne studied the documents with something like wonder. "And you're creative director, youngest in the house's history." She smiled slightly. "Turns out when you stop being someone's possession, you have time to be brilliant. You were always brilliant." "I know, but you made me forget it sometimes." He flinched at that. "I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. We're past that. Look at the designs." He pulled out sketches, clearly Zara's work, mixed with architectural precision that echoed his own aesthetic. "This is a new collection, reconstruction. I need your input before I present it to the board." "I'm in prison. You're still a designer, the best one I've ever met, even if you're also a criminal." Her voice was matter-of-fact. "I learned from you that both things can be true." Étienne's hands trembled slightly as he studied her sketches. "These are incredible. The way you've integrated Nigerian textile techniques with French silhouettes. That's why I need you, to make them perfect." They spent the rest of the visit discussing fabric, drape, construction. It felt like those early fitting sessions, but without the predatory undertone. Just 2 designers collaborating, 2 people who understood each other's language. When the guard announced time was up, Étienne looked at her with something vulnerable. "Why are you really doing this? Coming here, involving me in your work. You don't owe me anything." "I know, that's why I'm doing it." The restructured Maison Verenne barely resembled Étienne's empire. Zara had transformed the atelier. African designers and fabrics integrated into French couture techniques, transparent supply chains, livable wages, cooperative ownership. Everything Étienne's world had opposed, she'd built in its place. Christophe found her late one evening amid fabric samples, working by lamplight. The board wants to know if you'll keep the Verenne name, he said. There's debate. Some think it's tainted beyond repair. What do you think? I think names carry history, not destiny. We choose what to do with them. He handed her a letter. From my brother. He refuses to send it through prison mail. Too public. Alone, Zara read Étienne's angular handwriting. Zara. You asked me once what I wanted from you. I told you obedience, which was a coward's answer. The truth is I wanted permission to be seen, clearly, monster and man together, and be chosen anyway. You gave me that. It was the most terrifying gift I've ever received. I've had time to understand. I didn't select you from that line of interns because you were talented, though you are. I selected you because you looked at me and didn't see a legacy or a fortune. You saw a person trying desperately to feel something real. I resented you for it. I wanted to own it, control it, keep it contained. Instead, you freed us both. Don't wait for me. Don't build your life around my release, but know that every disciplined day in here, I'm reconstructing something. Not the man you wanted me to be. I'll never be that. But maybe someone who can stand beside you without casting shadows. The sketches are perfect. Approve them all. A. Zara folded the letter carefully, pressed it against her chest, and cried for the first time since the trial. Étienne was released early, 26 months served of a 4-year sentence, time reduced for cooperation and rehabilitation programs. Zara was waiting outside La Santé at dawn. He stopped when he saw her, visibly unsure. This controlled man suddenly awkward, holding a small bag of belongings, looking lost in civilian clothes that hung slightly loose on his prison-lean frame. You didn't have to, he began. I know. They stood 3 feet apart, years of complexity between them. I'm not the same person, Étienne said carefully. Prison broke things in me, some good things, some that needed breaking. I'm not the same either. I'm not your intern anymore. I'm not your muse. I'm your equal, or I'm nothing. I know. If we do this, Zara continued, voice steady, there are conditions, no games, no control disguised as care. You tell me when you're struggling with old patterns, I tell you when I need space. We build something neither of us recognizes from before. That sounds terrifying. It is. Do you want it anyway? Étienne considered her. This woman, who'd somehow become both exactly who she was and entirely transformed, confident in her skin, powerful in her own right, no longer needing his protection because she'd built her own. Yes, he said simply, but I need time. I need to prove I can exist in the world without owning it first. How much time? 6 months. Let me work at the atelier as a junior designer. Let me earn credibility separate from my name. Let me be anonymous for once. Zara nodded slowly. And after 6 months? Ask me again if I'm worth the risk. If I am, he allowed himself a small, genuine smile. Take me to dinner. Let me order for myself this time. Paris Fashion Week, 6 months later. The Reconstruction collection was revealed to industry acclaim. Fusion of African textiles and French couture, garments that deconstructed and rebuilt traditional forms. Each piece told a story of transformation, of something broken and rebuilt stronger. The final piece was the ivory gown Étienne had designed for Zara years. Ego, completely remade. Silk now interwoven with Nigerian aso-oke fabric in deep indigo. Architectural shoulders softened into something fluid. The whole thing transformed from armor to art. Zara wore it herself to close the show. First time a creative director had walked their own runway in decades. The crowd erupted. Standing ovation, flashbulbs, the fashion press already writing headlines about the resurrection of Maison Verenne under new vision. Backstage, amid celebrating staff and champagne and chaos, Étienne appeared. He'd been working under a pseudonym, A. Marchand, as a junior pattern maker. Few people knew he was back. Fewer connected the quiet man who came early and left late with the disgraced heir who'd nearly destroyed the house. You changed the dress, he said, approaching carefully. I improved it. Collaboration, not domination. It's better than my original. He meant it. Of course it is. I'm a better designer than you. she grinned. Though you're catching up. They stood amid the celebration, the empire they'd rebuilt together buzzing with legitimate success. I believe, Étienne said carefully, we had plans for dinner after 6 months? We do, but I'm ordering for myself. I'm counting on it. He offered his arm, not possessive, just present. An invitation, not a command. Zara took it. As they left together, Christophe watched from across the room. His partner murmured, "Think they'll actually make it?" Does it matter? They already destroyed and rebuilt an entire fashion house together. A relationship should be easy after that. They returned to Le Grand Véfour, scene of their first date where Étienne had ordered for her, corrected her silverware, demonstrated his control. This time, everything was different. Zara ordered in French, chose her own courses, corrected Étienne's wine selection with a playful smile. "When did you become a sommelier?" he asked, amused. "When I decided I belonged here on my own terms." Over dinner, they talked like equals, debating next collection themes, disagreeing about business strategies, laughing at industry gossip. The conversation felt light, but underneath was the weight of everything they'd survived. "Can I tell you something?" Étienne asked, serious now. "Always. I still have the impulse. To control, to own, to keep you in a space where I understand our dynamic. It probably won't ever fully go away. I know. I still have the impulse to make myself smaller so you'll feel comfortable. My damage doesn't evaporate either. So what do? We notice. We name it. We choose different." Zara reached across the table, took his hand. "And we keep rebuilding every day, something that looks nothing like what we started with." Étienne turned her hand over, studied it, these hands that once trembled around him, now steady and strong. "I love you," he said. First time he'd ever said it directly. Not the way I thought I wanted to, not possessively or obsessively, just truly. Zara's eyes shone. "I love you too, the real you, damaged and trying, arrogant and humble, the heir and the man, all of it. Even knowing I'll probably mess this up occasionally. Especially knowing that. We're not a fairy tale, Étienne. We're the complicated aftermath of one. That's better." He brought her hand to his lips, a gesture once controlling, now reverent. "Better," he agreed. They left the restaurant together, walking through Paris streets neither of them owned anymore. Not the intern and the heir, not the victim and the criminal, not even the designers rebuilding an empire. Just two people who'd looked at each other's damage and decided it was worth staying for, not to fix, but to witness, to honor, to grow alongside. The corruption had been named. The reconstruction continued, and in the space between what they were and what they were becoming, they'd found something neither knew existed. Honest love, earned through destruction and built through choice. The seduction wasn't resolved. It was transformed into something sustainable, conscious, and real. Zara had learned that claiming space in systems designed to exclude her wasn't about being chosen by powerful men. It was about building her own authority, even when that meant destroying illusions about protection and mentorship. Étienne had learned that control was the opposite of intimacy, that true power was the ability to be vulnerable without losing yourself, and that love required the courage to release what you most wanted to possess. Together, they discovered that love between damaged people wasn't about healing each other. It was about witnessing each other's brokenness with honesty and choosing to build something new from the pieces. The story didn't end with happily ever after. It ended with honestly continuing, a relationship maintained through constant choice, uncomfortable honesty, and the daily work of not repeating old patterns. The old money aesthetic remained, but emptied of its corrupt power dynamics and refilled with earned legitimacy, transparent practices, and genuine partnership. Zara Ocon, who'd arrived in Paris desperate and powerless, now walked beside Étienne Verenne as his equal. And he, who'd once needed to own everything he touched, had finally learned the difference between possession and love. Some cages were golden, some were necessary, but the best relationships were built when two people held the keys together and chose, every single day, to stay.